The sun was sinking slowly behind us, painting the sky in dull shades of gray and yellow as the cold wind swept through the streets. Claire walked with her head down, silent, a few steps behind me. Beside me, Michael Sanders gripped his rifle, an old AK-47 that he carried as if it were a part of him. The way he handled that weapon, the calm precision in every movement, said more about his past than any story he could ever tell. I glanced at him briefly, then turned to Sarah. Sarah was dark-skinned, with deep brown eyes and long, straight hair that fell across her shoulders. She was close to my age, maybe 20, 21 at most, but her eyes carried a heaviness no one that young should ever know. None of us looked young anymore. We had aged years in just months, stripped of everything that once defined us. A machete lay discarded in the street. On its blade, etched crudely with paint, were the words, "Inf 1 is not lethal. Vaccines will be distributed by the end of the year." Empty promises carved into rusting metal. We stopped at an old convenience store. The windows were shattered, jagged glass still clinging to the frames. I stepped through, the crunch of broken shards beneath my boots echoing in the silence. I doubted there was anything left inside, but it was worth the look. This was New York City, once the city that never slept. Now it felt no different from anywhere else. Dead, hollow, forgotten. We had come from Albany. That city was gone. Bodies filled the streets, but most never made it outside. They died in their homes, clinging to the walls they once thought safe. The cold was merciless. My eyes fell on a Santa Claus doll slumped by the entrance, its wide, painted eyes staring blankly back at me. For a moment, it felt alive, like a ghost mocking me with its smile. Today was supposed to mean something. January 1st, a new year, a day of beginnings. But there was no celebration here. No fireworks, only silence. Inside, strands of old holiday tinsel clung to the shelves. A dusty toy Santa sat crookedly on a counter, smaller and sadder than the one outside. On a shelf, a forgotten box of chocolates caught my attention. I brushed off the dust, pried it open, and found a few left inside. "Want one, Claire?" I asked, holding it out. She shook her head. "No thanks, Daniel." "Suit yourself." I popped one into my mouth. It was stale, but sweet enough to remind me of a world that didn't exist anymore. Farther back, in one of the old freezers, I spotted a beer. I grabbed it, cracked the lid, and took a sip. It was warm. I hated warm beer. My uncle once showed me a trick when I was a teenager, how to sink bottles into the riverbed to cool them when the power was out. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else, some other lifetime. The smell inside the store was the same as everywhere we had passed. The thick stench of rot, of death. It clung to everything, no matter where we went. I looked out the broken window. The sun was sinking into the horizon, twilight bleeding into night. That in-between hour, when the last light dies and darkness claims everything. "Claire," I said, lifting the bottle slightly. "Want a beer?" She shook her head again. "No." Claire looked about 30, but life had forced 50 years onto her face. She had been a teacher once, the kind of woman who smiled easily, who saw the best in people, but that was before she lost everything. Her family, her children, her husband, even the dog. Now her eyes reflected nothing but loss. I used to be a psychologist before INF1, the red flu. I recognized the signs, the hollow stares, the exhaustion, the quiet despair that never left. Claire carried it. Michael did too. Michael Sanders, in his 40s, wore the face of a man 20 years older. He had been a soldier in the U.S. Army, a father once too. His little boy had suffocated during the early days of the outbreak, and his wife followed not long after. That broke something inside him. I could see it every time he gripped that rifle just a little too tight. And me? I was just Daniel Brooks, a man trying to keep walking, even as the world crumbled around us. "Michael, let's go," I told him, watching as he rummaged through what little hadn't already been taken. A few cans, some boxed milk. I picked him up and twisted the cap. The smell hit me immediately. Sour. Shit, it's spoiled. Damn it, Michael muttered. The milk poured out thick, yellowish, curdled. I tossed it to the floor in disgust. The last thing we needed now was food poisoning. "Michael, get out of the store, now." "I'm done grabbing what I can," he said, slinging the bag over his shoulder. I stepped outside, glancing at the sun as it slipped lower on the horizon. The sky was smeared in gray, tinged faintly yellow. Ahead of us, the street was still lined with bodies. Some lay on the sidewalks, bloated beyond recognition. Others were stacked haphazardly into the backs of military trucks that sat abandoned in the avenue, covered with torn tarps. Black body bags, many ripped open, many tied sloppily, revealed hands, feet, even half-exposed faces. On the broken wall, its surface plastered with weathered posters, a faded notice still clung. The ink, barely legible, read, "Urgent alert. The red flu is extremely deadly. Genetic compatibility rate 80.1%. Total isolation recommended. The U.S. government is hiding data. The WHO and the UN are complicit. Do not trust official broadcasts." I pulled my scarf over my nose as we walked past the line of corpses. The smell was suffocating. Flies swarmed above, buzzing in frantic circles. One darted toward my eye, and I swatted it away. New York City, America's capital of light and noise, was now an open-air cemetery. Death was everywhere. Since December, not a single plane had crossed the sky. No engines. No trails of white against the blue. Nothing. We hadn't heard a word on the radios either. Every night, Michael sat hunched over his old battery-powered shortwave, twisting dials, clinging to static, searching for a voice that never came. "Do you like beer, Sarah?" I asked, my words clumsy, just an attempt to cut through the silence. She shook her head. "I don't drink." "More for me, then," I said, with a shrug, taking a sip. The taste was bitter, flat, but I forced it down anyway. Before the red flu, I would never have touched something like this. Back then, my habits were different. My life was different. I wasn't just comfortable. I was rich, filthy rich. My family owned corporations across the country. Those glass towers downtown with Brooks and Associates shining on their sides. Some of those belonged to us. Thousands of employees depended on our empire. And even though I was barely in my 20s, I had already become one of the wealthiest heirs in the nation. My name was splashed across society magazines, painted as the promising young successor. My mother adored it, called it a blessing from God. She was deeply religious, fanatical in ways that used to embarrass me. She said everything, wealth, health, opportunity, came from divine order, a gift, a plan. And now, I wonder if she'd still believe in that order. Because the world ended on Christmas, Christ's birthday. I remember that day clearly. The 25th. I went downstairs, expecting to find the security guard at his post. But the booth was empty. No monitors lit up. No uniform leaning back in the chair. I walked the hallways of our building, knocking on neighbors' doors. No one answered. I stepped outside. The street was deserted. Cars sat abandoned with doors wide open. A baby stroller left crooked against the curb. Shopping bags scattered in the gutter, as if dropped mid-run, never reclaimed. The air carried a strange smell. Not rot, not yet, but sharp, metallic, like blood drying under the sun. And that was the beginning.
I walked toward the main avenue. No cars moved, no people, only scraps of paper tumbling through the air, pushed by the wind. Red quarantine alerts blinked on broken digital billboards, looping endlessly, as if someone somewhere still believed order could be maintained. That's where I saw the first bodies. Some slumped behind steering wheels. Others lay on the subway steps, their limbs twisted unnaturally. A cluster of corpses had been piled in front of a looted pharmacy, all of them pale, stiff, motionless. Some still wore masks, half covering their faces, as if they had believed that thin layer of fabric could protect them. I screamed that day, called out for help, for anyone, but no one came. My voice bounced off glass and steel, swallowed by the hollow city. I walked for hours, maybe the whole day. My throat burned raw from shouting. My legs ached with every step. The sky carried that sickly green-gray hue, heavy and wrong, and the wind had a sharpness colder than winter should allow. When the sun was gone, I found myself back at home, alone. I locked the doors, every window, and lit candles. I remember staring at the flame, realizing December 25th had been humanity's last day. A cruel irony. In November, the Earth had 8 billion people. By Christmas, I could count the survivors on my hands. What a cosmic joke, right? Jesus came into the world to save it, and on his birthday, the world ended. I know religion had nothing to do with it. It wasn't divine punishment. Could have been anything. A virus from space, a bioweapon released by men in power. It didn't matter. Back then, money was never my problem. If I wanted something, I got it. Designer clothes? I had closets full. Trips? I went anywhere. Paris, London, Tokyo. I lived like I was untouchable, like life was some endless vacation. But now money was worthless, not even good enough to light a fire or wipe your ass. I shook the thoughts from my head and turned to Michael Sanders. He was fiddling with the straps on his rifle, as always. "Why do you carry that AK-47? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. His reply was immediate, his voice flat. "In case we run into someone." I laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "Someone? Out here? That's very unlikely." Michael's eyes hardened as he looked at me. "Unlikely, not impossible. We found Sarah and Claire, didn't we?" I didn't argue, though deep down I doubted. People were ghosts now. "Possible," I muttered, "but unlikely." We kept walking, then piled into an old 1980s Chevy Impala we'd salvaged a few days back. The leather seats were cracked, the engine coughing, but it still moved. Michael took the wheel. The further we drove from New York, the thinner the stench became. But the roads told their own story. Highways were clogged with cars frozen in place, abandoned mid-flight by families trying to escape to the mountains. Windows smashed, trunks ripped open, belongings strewn across the asphalt. On the right side of the road, I noticed a little girl's body. Blonde hair fanned out across the ground, her small fingers clenched around a stuffed bear. Dried mucus and blood crusted her tiny face. "She looks like my daughter," Claire whispered. Her voice cracked, and for a moment the silence broke. Claire rarely spoke. When she did, it was almost always about what she had lost. Sarah reached across the seat and pulled her into an embrace. Michael kept driving, jaw clenched, eyes straight ahead. "Try the radio," he said finally. I grabbed the shortwave, slid in the batteries, and turned the dial. Nothing but static. I fiddled with it for 20 minutes, desperate, until a faint voice. "No way," Michael whispered, his eyes widening. Even his composure cracked with surprise. The voice was rough, distorted, but clear enough. "Friends, we have a refugee camp near Newark. We have food, supplies, doctors, repeating the location." My hands shook. "Holy shit," I breathed. "That's close. We could be there tomorrow." The car swerved between corpses scattered on the road. Sometimes we couldn't avoid them. Each time we struck one, the sound, bones cracking under metal, made us shudder. We shut the windows tight to keep out the stench. Night fell. We parked the Impala by the side of the road, wrapped in the silence of death. The cold pressed against the windows like a wet blanket. We slept inside the car. Sarah curled up in my arms in the back seat. In the front, Michael held Claire tightly as she shook in her sleep. At one point, she screamed her children's names into the dark, jolting awake in tears. Sarah mumbled restless phrases, words I couldn't make out. Me? I didn't dream. I never did anymore. It was like anesthesia, blacking out, then snapping awake, as if no time had passed at all. That was life now, a broken rhythm between silence and survival.
We kept moving toward Newark, pushing the Impala through a road that still bore the scars of panic. An overturned truck blocked part of the lane. We crawled around it with the engine whining, tires crunching over broken branches and scattered debris. As we neared the city, the northern skyline smoked in a slow, steady burn. Mannequins stood in empty storefronts like sentries, their faces blurred by shattered glass. They said the refugee zone had been set up at the old cathedral. "You think it's safe, Michael?" I asked, the question more ritual than hope. "I'm not hiding," he said bluntly. "When we go in, I'll stash the rifles in the shop next door." "Think there'll be corpses inside?" Claire muttered. She spoke rarely, but when she did, the words carried like stones. "Probably," Sarah answered, palms flat against her belt. We kept the knives close. Michael was always on edge. "Better safe than sorry," he said, tightening the strap on his pack. The cathedral doors complained when we pushed them open. Wind funneled through the nave, carrying cold that felt more like a judgment than a season. Inside, rows of chairs had been overturned or left askew. Some seats held coverings, folded blankets, the shapes of bodies beneath, or things that had once been bodies. The metallic tang of old blood and smoke hung in the air, sharp enough to make my eyes water. I found a cloth on a bench, brittle with age and stained in ways that made my stomach tighten. I lifted it, and the sight made my knees go weak, not because of any splash of gore, but because of what it meant. A small, ruined bundle, grotesquely out of place in a place meant for prayer. My head swam. The world turned slow and wrong. I remember leaning against a pillar, and then everything went dark. When I came back, the sounds around me were wrong in a way that logic couldn't catch. The shuffle of feet, the wet slap of something handled, a low animal hum under it all. I saw 3 figures nearby, a tall man with a face that had been chewed by sun and cruelty, a shorter bald man with a hard, quick way of moving, and a woman who watched like someone used to being in charge. Their eyes slid to me with a kind of bored hunger that felt colder than the winter air. Pain lanced under my foot, and I realized I'd been stepped on, trapped in a position I couldn't fix. Panic pushed at the edges of my vision. There was movement, hands busy with something at the grill, a smell like charred meat and smoke, and something that made bile rise in my throat. And then the terrible comprehension. They were feeding. Not animals, people. Not in tidy historical terms, but messy, present, and hungry in a way that erased the rules we'd thought immutable. I tried to pull myself free. Claire and Sarah were there too, bound to chairs, their faces hollow with shock, their eyes reflecting the room's low light. The taller man worked without ceremony, tearing and tearing again. Each motion was slow, ritualistic, like a butcher's practiced swing performed by someone who'd abandoned shame. The shorter, bald man scrubbed a piece on the floor, then popped it into his mouth with a quick, animal greed. The woman laughed softly, cheap and casual, as if offering hospitality. "What the hell is this?" I barked, throat raw. The words came out brittle. The tall man glanced up, expression almost apologetic. "Hey, don't make a scene," he said, voice syrup-sweet and wrong. "We're all trying to survive." There was no irony in it. He gestured with a piece of flesh held out at arm's length as if offering me hospitality. "Want a bite?" His grin had no humor. It sat in his mouth like a rot. I gagged. The shorter man grabbed me, holding my face in a grip that smelled of smoke and old sweat. "Don't kill him," he hissed at the tall man. "We need him alive. You know how it goes? Fresh stays better." The bald man's eyes darted with a cruel industry, making plans with each blink. They argued about things in low voices, who to keep, who to let go, how the bodies could be used. I overheard the bluntness like a hammer. Utility first, sentimentality long dead. The radio voice that had once brought a sliver of hope now crackled over the cathedral's hush. Refugee camp, food, doctors. It was the same broadcaster from days before, impossibly patient. But here, it had the absurdity of irony. "Motherfuckers," someone muttered nearby, and then laughed. The sound was a dry death rattle. The woman leaned forward and tapped a small black bag at her feet. "My kids are here," she said casually, as if dropping a line in a conversation about weather. Her words were a knife. I couldn't tell if she was lying. The room smelled of burning, of something once human turned into fuel. Claire sobbed quietly. Sarah made a small choking sound, and then went very still, as if she'd put herself behind a locked door, so she could watch without seeing. "You behave," the tall man told me, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "and maybe you get to watch while we enjoy ourselves." His hand toyed with a knife, the metal catching candlelight. In that moment, I thought of Michael down the street, in the grocery store where he'd been hiding. He'd promised to set an ambush if anything went wrong. I tried to picture him in the doorway with the radio and the batteries, his face set like flint, and the image steadied me. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of begging. They wanted to make it personal, to humiliate. They wanted me to eat, or to watch, or to plead. Instead, I spat on the floor, a small act of defiance. The bald man laughed and slapped my face with the back of his hand, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to remind me of my place. Somewhere in the cathedral's dark corners, the radio crackled another promise: shelter, supplies, a location I couldn't trust. We were supposed to be heading for hope. Instead, we'd opened the door to something older and colder. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe steady, to hold on to the shape of what was left of who I'd been. Fear trembled along my skin, precise and sharp. Survival had taken on new rules here, rules that made the world stranger than any nightmare.
A cold wave of hatred crawled up my spine. That smug grin, stretched from ear to ear, looked like some horrid game show host, sneering as if we were the punchline. Then the shot cracked. The woman's head snapped back in an instant. The next report split the air and the man went down. Warm spray hit my face. For a breath, I tasted iron. Michael had arrived. He moved like a man who didn't waste time. In seconds, he had cut us loose, hands steady and efficient. He knelt, glanced at my foot, and his face closed up with a kind of practical concern. He knew we had a problem. "Looks like I caused you some trouble," I muttered, more out of habit than humor. The pain throbbed in reply. We left the cathedral without ceremony, walking until the city blurred behind us. We drifted, aimless and quiet. No one wanted to own the sound of speech. Sarah stared at my leg, worry knitted into her features. She said, "We need to find medicine. Antibiotics." Michael shook his head. "That stuff can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. In the war, I saw a man lose his leg because he took the wrong pills. Start with alcohol. Clean it first." We stopped at the car. Everyone spilled out. Michael fished a bottle of alcohol from behind a seat and didn't hesitate. He poured the burn over the wound. The cold hit like flame. Pain lanced through me so sharp I blacked out. When I came to, the bandage was new and tight. We were parked by a river, the current whispering under a sky the color of old newsprint. "We're going to stay over there," Michael said, nodding toward a line of trees. The others left to make camp. I stayed in the car longer than I should have. When I forced myself out and tried to walk, hunger made each step feel like it was tearing something from inside me. Sarah and Michael spoke in low voices a few yards away, the words too ordinary for the rest of the world. Rationing, watch shifts, scavenging. The river moved on, indifferent. I lay down on the cold ground and stared at the gray above. If I didn't eat soon, I knew the timeline. A few days, then thinner breaths, then nothing. Those thoughts slipped around my mind like hungry animals. You think strange things when you're sudden and close to the edge. The idea that it might not be so bad drifted in and did not leave. I can't explain why a thought like that lodges itself in your skull, how it cycles with the ache and the quiet. Michael had a gun, a heavy piece he kept by the seat. I watched it once, when he dozed, the metal smiling in the moonlight. I imagined taking it at night. Quick, clean, almost clinical. I know how that sounds on paper, and I know how dangerous it is to dwell on it. I'm not asking for pity. I am writing this because the world fell apart, and we barter meaning with memory now. Maybe I'll try to sleep and wake up hungrier and more stubborn. Maybe I won't. With this leg and this hurt, time feels thin. The wound is darkening at the edges. It throbs like a warning. My head burns with feverish thoughts. I want someone, someday, if anyone finds these words, to know what it was like. The small mercies, the stupid vanities that don't matter anymore, the ways we tried to keep one another sane. I don't expect a diary to save us. I only expect it to be honest. For now, I'm alive. I can still feel the ground beneath me. I can still hear the river. That will have to be enough for tonight.